Okay, welcome back, everyone. I'm Craig Steger. I'm the host of this live stream, which I do pretty much every weekday at around 4:30 p.m. Central Time. I'm running a few minutes behind today. I um, I was doing some CLEs this afternoon. That, for those that don't know, that's continuing legal education. And like a lot of attorneys, I'm trying to cram at the end of the year to make sure I get my credits in. And so today it was a 3 hour ethics webinar on really the ethics of social media, YouTubing, and to some extent live streaming. And I've been really very interested in trying to make sure that I'm complying with the ethical rules when it comes to my videos, especially live streaming. And so that is one of the reasons why you get to see this disclaimer language here on the screen. I'll probably scroll it at some point in time. It'll be in the description. Just to remind you that this live stream was for informational purposes only, and it does not constitute legal advice. I'm not giving legal advice. And viewing or participating in this live stream does not create an attorney-client relationship. So if you happen to show up in the comments or the live chat and ask a question that does not create an attorney-client relationship, I'm here to talk about um, my observations and personally just my own personal opinions. I'll restrict those to the states I practice in, which is Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Iowa. Now, what's interesting is so because as I mentioned, I'm doing some CLEs this year, and when in the three states I practice in all have different CLE requirements and timing. So Iowa, for example, I have to do 15 credits a year, and I have to report every single year. I have to have my credits done by the end of December, and then there's a certain number of the credits have to be ethics, a certain number have to be like elimination of bias. Wisconsin, I report every 2 years. This is an off year. Last year I reported, and then I'll report again next year, and that's 30 credits over 2 years. So it's essentially 15 credits a year, but you could do all 30 credits in 1 year if you wanted to. Same thing. Some of it's ethics, some of it's yeah, some of it has to be ethics. And then Minnesota is kind of the oddball. I only report every 3 years, and it's 45 credits, I think. And that is in August. I have no idea how they came up with August. It used to catch me by surprise, except that now, once I got, so I originally got admitted in Wisconsin. That's where I took the bar exam. About a year later, within the next year, I got admitted to Minnesota. And then Iowa's been within the last 5 years or so. But once I got to Iowa, I'm just having to take credits every year anyway. It didn't really matter. I was always getting the credits, and I do my credits online. And fortunately, one of the nice things that came out of COVID is it became much easier to do your continuing education online or virtually. Used to be I'd have to travel to, let's say, Madison or maybe to the Twin Cities and sit through a seminar and get 6 7 credits. It took a lot of time, and it was kind of expensive, and now you can do everything online. The only real difference between the states is whether you have to do like a live presentation where you're on, kind of like this is a live video feed right now, or whether you can go back later and watch the video replay. Well, in Wisconsin, at least, you can get some of your credits by watching the replay, and some of them has to be a live interaction like this. Whereas Iowa, I think, in Minnesota now have gone to, you can get all of your credits, what we call on demand, which means you don't have to be there when it's actually being presented or recorded, which is kind of nice. So anyway, so that's what I was doing today. That's why I'm running a little bit behind. But what I wanted to talk about, so let's get that off the screen there. Um, uh, I'm always interested in trucking cases, and this isn't a Wisconsin case, but I want to, or Minnesota or Iowa case, but I'm going to talk about a little bit within those contexts. So there was this huge verdict in Texas of $116 million. Not sure when let's see if it says when it happened, but it's in front of the Texas Supreme Court, and essentially it looks like what happened is this: it was icy roads, a semi was driving, and a car coming from the other direction lost control and slid in front of the semi, and as you might expect, the semi couldn't stop, hit the car, and I think there was a fatality and a bad injury in the car. And so, as I understand it, the question was whether the truck driver was negligent in sort of, was he going too fast that he couldn't react to a car sliding in front of him? And and so what's interesting about the case, is it goes back to this old railroad case. I'm not sure which state that's from, but the argument of the trucking company is basically it's certainly foreseeable that somebody in the next lane could come into your lane, but you can't realistically travel down the highway if you have to anticipate that somebody might, without warning, leave the interstate 30 feet across. So they were saying this isn't a two lane highway. This is a 4-lane highway, and they came all the way across and slid in front of the semi. Now, obviously, I wasn't there for that trial. I don't know everything that happened, but that is sort of the issue for the Supreme Court of Texas, at least, is what's the duty of care of the truck in that case? I mean, they're like, hey, we're just driving down the highway on a 4-lane highway, and a vehicle from the other side, there's a whole median in between us, came across and ran in front of us, and we hit him. How can that be our fault? At least that's the argument of the trucking company. So in looks like the Supreme, the Texas Supreme Court is going to, I guess, answer that question. But I was thinking about that because, obviously that could happen here in the Midwest. It could happen, we have probably more of this kind of bad weather in, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Iowa. I've seen this happen. I've seen cars lose control and they go across the median. And what's interesting in trucking situations is, so everyone that's on the road typically, let's just say in these 3 states, has a duty of reasonable care. And um, that applies to everyone on the road, semi drivers, passenger vehicles, all that kind of stuff. But it's generally accepted that for commercial motor vehicles, so if you have a CDL license, which is a commercial driver's license, and you're driving at least interstate, or you're driving a vehicle that has to have a federal DOT number, I think is the standard. Then those drivers are subject to a heightened duty of care. And I've had trucking cases where that's that's been the point of contention, is what does that even look like? What does it mean for a truck driver to have a heightened duty of care relative to the rest of the population? Some examples might be this. So, if you are approaching an intersection, one of the things that a semi operator must begin braking before the intersection at a much greater distance than someone driving a car, but just because of the weight, and especially on slippery roads. So that duty of care of the truck driver is heightened beyond the average passenger car driver, because they're driving a big piece of equipment. It takes longer to stop. Jackknifing is more of an issue, that kind of stuff. And in fact, um, truck drivers are expected to actually be very defensive, to actually look out for other drivers, even if those other drivers are, let's say, being negligent themselves. So if a semi driver sees another car that's, let's say, not paying attention, or they're kind of weaving in and out, or whatever the case may be, the defensive driving indicates that the truck drivers have to really pay attention to that, and can't just plow through a car because, well, they didn't yield to me, right? That kind of stuff. And so there is that heightened duty of care that truck drivers, commercial motor vehicle drivers, if they're driving interstate, cross state lines, things like that, have that added duty that's based on federal regulations. And I think the question then is, well, what does that mean in practice? What does that mean on icy roads? It's somewhat, I think, straightforward to say, well, truck drivers need to be especially careful and cautious on slippery roads because they need lots more time to stop than a passenger vehicle, right? Those of us are driving our own regular cars and pickups. So being very, very careful about making sure you have sufficient um, distance to be able to stop. And you see these pile up videos online and things like that. So that's pretty obvious, right? But it seems like the argument that the lawyers for the injured people made in that case is like, look, if it's slippery and it's foreseeable that cars are going to lose control around you, you may just need to park your semi. I mean, that might be an argument that you would make. Maybe that's an argument I would make if I was representing someone here that was injured in that under those circumstances. It sounds like the trucking company really took issue with the fact that it was traffic coming across the median on the 4 lane, and it almost sounds like they were willing to sort of concede that they have a duty to watch out for traffic coming directly at you. Um, and I don't know. I don't know what a jury or a judge here in the Midwest would do. I did kind of run this through Chat GPT. I was just curious to see how it might play out. Because really the issue is foreseeability. So what does that mean? There's a duty of drivers, including truck drivers, to avoid foreseeable hazards, foreseeable injuries. And so what does it mean for it to be foreseeable? And it's not really a very clear standard. It's kind of a generic standard that the jury, if a case is filed, would have to apply to the facts of the case. Um, I don't know that there's any specific federal regulations. This may come down to the comparative fault of the driver that presumably, not necessarily, but presumably the vehicle that lost control and came across the median had some fault. They were probably driving too fast. Now maybe they were driving fine and they got bumped by another vehicle. There's a lot of scenarios, but probably a big issue in these kinds of cases would be like, okay, how do we divide up fault, and how does the state determine fault? Because states determine, we call that comparative fault. Comparative fault means if, let's say, two vehicles are involved in a crash, it may be there may be shared blame, right? It may be 50-50. It could be 60-40, 70-30. Or if you got three, maybe it's everyone's a third responsible. That's what comparative fault means. Yeah, I think one of the questions would be, that this is where you pretty much have to hire experts. So, like when I've had trucking cases like this, I'll hire a trucking expert, someone that has a lot of years of experience. Maybe they've been like a fleet safety manager someone that's training drivers. Um, I just find it in a case involving a trucking accident, especially if you want to argue that there is a heightened duty of care. That's usually where I'll go out and I'll find a trucking expert who can get in and tell the jury, well, this is what it means to be a truck driver. You have a heightened duty of care. These are the things that you have to do, or this is some of the stuff that the company needs to do to train that truck driver, right? I'm going to give you a little disclaimer again. So, like Iowa, it says a person must act with the care that a reasonably careful person would exercise in similar circumstances. Now, I don't know what that does for commercial motor vehicle operators. Truck drivers are expected to exercise heightened vigilance given the potential dangers of their vehicles, except that, a semi going down the road, he or she just happens to be in that place that, like, the semi didn't cause the other vehicle to lose control. It's one thing to be driving too fast and a vehicle loses control in front of you and you don't have time to stop. But it's sort of like, are you really expected to anticipate vehicles just coming from anywhere? I think maybe a more common example you can think about is if you're driving down the road and you know that there's stop signs and you see vehicles. Sometimes you see a vehicle coming from your side and, like, man, are they going to stop? We may slow down a little bit, and but most of us aren't going to come to a stop. We're going to kind of presume that they are going to stop. But on the other hand, if it's clear to us they're not going to stop, we need to avoid that collision if we can. It may require us to use our brakes, even though they're required to yield to us. Same thing in Minnesota. Foreseeability is a central concept of negligence. The question is whether a person acted as a reasonable person under the circumstances. So maybe one of the questions might be, you know, um, was the driver trained? Were they given any special training on how to drive on slippery roads? Maybe they're from out of state. Maybe they do most of their trucking out west or down south where they don't deal with snow and ice. And it could be a question: did the trucking company have a duty to say, you know what, don't go that way, or wait till the storm passes? Because there is certainly a lot of pressure on truckers to drive and to get. They don't make money sitting in truck stops, right? They make their money by driving, and so there can be an added pressure for truckers to get back on the road. um, a question might be, what how fast would the truck have to be going to be able to stop if a car darts out in front of them? And so it could be that the fact that the vehicle came all the way across from the other line of traffic, maybe that worked against the trucker and the trucking company, because they had more time to react. And if they're paying attention, maybe that's a worse scenario for the trucker and trucking company, because they've got more time to anticipate it. And if you're going so fast that you can't stop to avoid a car that you can see coming all the way across the median, all the way across into your lane of traffic, maybe that would work against. Maybe that is an indication that the trucker is going too fast for the conditions. Hard to say. Those are the kinds of questions that I would that's kind of where I would want to have a trucking expert involved to kind of answer those questions. Like, what is it actually like to be a truck driver? I'm not a truck driver. I don't have a CDL, although I've thought about getting one just out of curiosity. Um, yeah, I think that's it's certainly a pertinent thing to keep in mind now as we're getting into that time of year, especially here in the Midwest. Um, you do have to be careful. Um, it's easy to get in a hurry, and in some ways it feels like the interstates are faster because you're not slowing down and stopping all the time, but they can also be it can also be very dangerous, especially on slippery roads, as people are trying to remember what it's like to drive on slippery roads. So I guess the lesson for everyone, drivers and semi drivers, right? Yeah, that's a good point. Is it Mias? Amias? Around here it gets dark at what 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It seems like, and so it can be really hard to judge how slippery it is, or maybe it thaws during the day, and then as it starts to get colder or dark, it starts to get colder and starts to get slippery. Yeah, and if you're a trucker and you've been driving, you know, Mia. Okay. Hi, Mia. Um, maybe you started out the day in Kentucky, and then you end the day in Wisconsin, and by the time you get to Wisconsin, we've had one of our regular snowstorms or whatever, and it's very, very different. And so that might also be a factor that I would be interested in if I was handling a trucking case. Is okay. Um, where did you all travel that day? And what's your experience as a trucker driving in the type of weather that um, we're all used to around here? I think in Iowa, having grown up in Iowa, I seems to me we got a lot more ice in Iowa. Here in Wisconsin and Minnesota, I think we tend to get more snow. But that ice can be a real, you get those kind of in between days, and it's low 30s and gets foggy and things can get slippery. So yeah, and like I said, I've never driven a semi truck. I don't know what it's like to drive. I mean, I've pulled trailers with a pickup and things like that on slow, slippery roads. So I can only imagine. So yeah, I mean, I think as a commercial motor vehicle driver, given the heightened duty of the federal regulations, you have to be really careful, and it's really, really important for the companies to know where their drivers are going. If they're going to end up going through the Midwest, do they have the experience? Should they wait? As you indicate, Mia, if it gets dark, maybe they should pull over and wait till the next day. Wait, let the salt trucks get out. All that kind of stuff is probably all really important information that would be, you know, when these kinds of tragic situations happen. That's kind of what the case could very well come down to. So, um, yeah, what a sad, tragic story that was. Um, but be careful out there. Watch out for yourself, and almost more importantly, watch out for others, because you want to come home. You want to come home alive. Um, and Yeah, so that's all I had today. A little shorter one today, but that's these are common things. Especially here in the Midwest, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Iowa. Slippery roads. Um, that's a common issue that we deal with in car crash cases, and who's you know how fast, too fast, how much do you have to slow down, especially in corners, that kind of stuff. You have to really factor that in. Uh, Typically, you're not required to just stay home, but you got to slow down. You may not be able to be able to go the speed limit. Even though it's within the speed limit, it may still be too fast, just because it's um, you know snowy and icy out. Um, Where at in California are you at, if I can ask? So one of my sons is out in Southern California. He's a Marine, so we're hoping to see him here in about a month or so. I love California. I'd love to be out there now. Sounds much better than the weather we have here in Wisconsin. Um, but yeah, it's been okay. Sacramento. Which part of the state is Sacramento in? I'm not even sure. California is such a big state. Sacramento. Well, that's way in the north, isn't it? Yeah. I will tell him that this is his last year. He's in his last year of service. And we're going to, my wife and I are going out to Phoenix in almost exactly a month for a conference that I'm going to, and she's going to come along, and then we're gonna fly him over from San Diego and spend a few days with him. So we're very very excited about that. Yeah, this summer we took all of the kids, so all 9 kids, we took out to California to visit with him, and so we flew to Las Vegas and and we rented a big van, and we saw Hoover Dam. That was a lot of fun, and then we went to Disney. We took the kids over to Disney in Anaheim, I think it is. Spent a day there, and then we went down to the ocean side there, just north of San Diego, and hung out. And yeah, I enjoy that area. I never thought I would like California, but since he's been out there, I've made a number of trips out there to visit with him, and so yeah, we're looking forward to seeing him again. And um, yeah, maybe next time we'll. I kind of like to get to the northern part. I'd like to go up and see like the redwood forests and stuff. And we're not. And is it Yosemite? I think Yosemite is up there. That was too far out of the way for us to. That was too far away for us to go on this trip. But maybe next time we'll go out there and maybe travel and do some camping on the north side. I think, and I've been to Seattle a few times for depositions, maybe just once. So sometimes I get out to the West Coast. I get to Los Angeles. I've been out there half a dozen times now, it seems, for work. A lot of times when I have to hire doctors or experts on my cases here in the Midwest, I have to go out there, and it's kind of nice to go out and travel and see LA, and visit my son if I'm out. If it works out, I'll go down and visit him. I was out there one time meeting with one of my experts, and then I went down to uh, one of his promotions or graduations. I don't remember what it was, but yeah, I've gotten pretty used to how to how to travel around out there. So yeah, um, yeah, we've been thinking about taking all the kids out there. We're in the process of renovating a school bus, but I don't know if I'm going to drive the school bus all the way out there. But we might just fly out and then rent a big van like we did with when we went out this summer. I just rented a 15 passenger van and we drove around, and that actually worked pretty good. It just takes so long to get out there from Wisconsin that I don't know if I want to drive a camper or a bus if we ever get it done. But I would like to go out and see the northern part of California sometime. So yeah, take a big. It would take a big 4x4 for our group, but yeah. So we're going to Phoenix here in a month, and uh, looking forward to that. So Well, it was nice chatting with you, Mia. Maybe I'll see you. I should be back on tomorrow. But yeah, I'm going to wrap this one up. So if anyone has any questions about the video, feel free to leave a comment. If I'm able to answer it, I will. If I can cover it in another video, maybe I'll do that. But I appreciate anyone who watches my videos. I enjoy sharing this information. I certainly enjoy the live streams if people want to hop on and chat about anything. So, anyway, all right, I'm going to wrap this stream up. I appreciate you watching. And until next time, everyone, have a good one.